Hello, Twitch friends. Normally we have a little bit of a starting soon screen. I put a little starting soon screen, play some music, and then I let y'all gather, congregate in the chat while I post on social media or go and do final grab a water, bathroom break, whatever. But today we're just jumping right into it because we have a very special guest joining us for our very first stream of 2026, and we have finite time. So last year in 2025, one of my projects I started was the Twitch book club. I've been a whole year. I still don't have a better name for it. I'm sure other streamers have their own book clubs and call them the same thing. I'm terrible at naming things. But we started a little book club, made a little Discord server, and we kept it going for the whole year. And the way our book club works, for both just for Alex's benefit and anyone else, if you're joining us for the first time and you're curious about how we run our book club, maybe want to join. At the beginning of every month, technically the end of the previous month, I post a list of books, anywhere from like 10 to 12 books, and everyone gets to vote on which of these books they want to be our group read for the next month. So we pick one book a month to read together. Some of us could read many more than one book a month. Some read slower, and I tried to pick a pace that would accommodate for both the voracious readers and the slower readers, or the people that have less time to read. And then once that month has passed, then the following month I have some sort of live stream and I bring on guests who read the book from book club. Because again, since we pick a different book every month, some books will have a lot, or some months we have lots of people in the Discord read the book. Some months there's only like 4 to 5 of us that read the book. And I try and have varying guests join us every month, and we have a little chat about it. But this month we get to do something super exciting and different. So I had gone to a local bookish event with some local authors. I bought many books. I think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I bought 9 books at that event. And so I put some of them on our list to vote on, even though I figured not many people would have heard of them, because we tend to have a largely, it's like mostly American and European, I think, split in our Discord. There actually aren't many Canadians in because it's an online, started through my Twitch community book club. But I put some authors in there, and this book won. We had 5 people vote for the book of Light and Nightmares. I should have my copy in my hand, shouldn't I? There we go. So we had 5 people plus myself vote to read Of Light and Nightmares in December of 2025. And I posted on Instagram, as I do, our monthly pick. And Alex saw and got in touch and was gracious enough to offer to join us for a Q&A stream and be the first author to ever join our book club chats, which is so exciting. So thank you so much for doing that. It's a big deal for little old us. And I will say, so every other book of those 9 books I bought, 3 of them were this trilogy, because I bought the whole trilogy at once. And I'm very, very glad I did, because the way this book ended, so I had another book all lined up to read, because my husband gifted me a Christmas gift early. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I need to shelve your book. I need to pick up book 2 of this immediately, because where it ended, all I'm going to say is, if you want to pick up this book to read it, I highly recommend, and you're even mildly inclined that you think it'll be something you enjoy, have access to the second one somehow fairly quickly, because you're going to need to know what happens, because it ends on a lovely cliffhanger, as so many trilogies do early on in the series. So we have some questions prepared to ask Alex that were submitted earlier, but if you have a question during this Q&A while you're watching in the chat, feel free to post them there. Oh, my email's covering the screen. Feel free to post them there, and then we'll ask them as they come up. So if you didn't submit a question beforehand, don't worry, you can still participate. Before we get into the questions, Alex, if you want to just tell us maybe just the little like cliff notes or snapshot about yourself, or maybe what got you into writing in the first place before we jump into our specific questions. Oh, pause for 1 second. Apparently, stream cannot hear you. Let me make sure that my desktop audio is set to the correct device on my stream software, because that would help. This one. Okay, try again. Let's see if that works.
Hello.
There we go. Now it's showing up as audio. Thank you, James. So you'll have to just start from the beginning of that question that I asked you again. My apologies.
No. That's totally fine. Yeah, no, I've always wanted to be a writer since I was a child, and I guess like I had the audacity when I was a little kid. The audacity. I think I was still in elementary school when I did this. I don't know if you guys remember the show, The X-Files.
Yes.
I loved that show, and I had the audacity to write a script for The X-Files, and I
Amazing.
actually sent it to them.
Incredible.
I sent it to them, and of course, they did the right thing. They like sent it back unread because you don't do things like that. But I was a kid, I was a child. I didn't know. Anyways, so that was kind of like the start of my writing journey. As I kind of went through high school and went through university, I shelved it for a more, I'll call it a concrete career path because bills to pay, right?
Yep.
And then when the pandemic hit, I've always had this story kind of bouncing around in my head, and I was like, well, now I have a little bit of time. Let's see if I can get a story down. And this trilogy was born. So when you look at this trilogy, it's like it's not really I call it a trilogy. It's really one gigantic book that I've
That is how it
arbitrarily,
felt. Yeah,
right? Like
while
I've
reading
arbitrarily
it.
like just kind of like sliced it into three,
Yeah.
so that you're not holding like a tome, right? Like so. That's
You don't
just a
have to
little bit
pull a
of me.
Brandon Sanderson and find a publisher to
Like and
make a
like
book that's that big. Where his most recent book, he had to literally find a new publisher that he had for the whole series, or not a publisher,
to
but a
actually
physical booker. Because like we don't make books that big, and he had to find a new one who was willing to make the chonker of a book that's
yeah.
sitting on this shelf somewhere over there.
Nice.
But yeah, I had a suspicion of that actually because so many trilogies, it's like they end even on cliffhangers. They don't pick up like the breath after, the moment after. They pick up, there's like some sort of a time skip, whether it's only a day or two or a few weeks, a few months. But book two, minor spoiler, but don't worry, no plot spoilers for anyone who does read it, literally picks up, it's like the sentence after the cliffhanger of this one. Like it does, it's immediate continuation, which I thought was very, very interesting. And I really enjoyed that. And that was one of the things that it does definitely feel, and not in a bad way, it almost feels like I've read the first two books. I haven't read the third one yet, but it does almost feel like they were just one long book that you just had to find somewhere to split them up because otherwise.
Yeah, and there's a lot. Some people love that, and some people really do not like that.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of get like both ends of the spectrum on that one.
Yeah.
So
No, I followed the camp where I enjoyed it, but I've also always been the longer a book, the better. Like, other than from a physical standpoint, I have fibromyalgia, so sometimes the really big, heavy books, it's like it literally hurts my wrists if I have to try to hold them up to
no,
read them, and I have to use props. So, other than that, the longer a book, the better for me. Usually, the longer a series. Like, if I get attached to characters or a world, like I want more time in it. I've never understood people who are like, this series is too long, so I find that intimidating. I'm like, that's a positive for me. Okay then. Then we'll jump into the questions that were put in our Discord. First off, we'll start super casual, just so that if these words come up, I know I can say them correctly. So this is a fantasy novel, urban fantasy, for anyone who hasn't read it or is considering picking it up. And there are some fantasy races or fantasy like titles that are made in this book. And I'm gonna say my guess, and then you can correct me and tell me if I'm correct or how wrong I am. I'm fairly confident on two of them. It's the third one
Mhm.
that I'm like, I have no idea. So our protagonist is a type of being called an Elistier? Question
Yes,
mark?
you got it. You got
There we
it.
go. For the Zoom captions, it's not going to spell that right. So captions users, these are fantasy words. They're probably not going to be spelled correctly. But it's like Elystier. So that's what I figured. There was like some almost like French-ish on the IER pronunciation. I was fairly confident, but just in case. And then the more monstrous slash demonic race, if you will, the antagonist race at the start of this book, Rizor?
Razor.
Razor, okay, but
Razor.
Razor,
Almost
but spelled.
like a razor,
Yeah,
but razor.
okay, because
Yeah.
it's spelled
It's very close.
Raizor. So it's like slightly more a razor, but with more emphasis on the second syllable almost than the normal word.
Yeah.
Okay, now the one I'm just gonna let you pronounce because I every time I read it in my head, I said it a different way, and I've come up with like 4 or 5 versions of how to say this word. And these are the people like the magical protectors of the human world in this novel, the ones who hunt down the razor. It's spelled Nainthe, and it's basically the emphasis on what vowels was what was always tripping me up.
Oh, so I pronounce it as ninth.
Okay. See, I
Yeah.
was like making a second syllable, like the E on the end, and in my head, I thought it was almost like ending, if it was written phonetically, like in a
Uh-huh.
UH, like Nantha or something like that. Like I was adding
Oh.
this sound on
Oh,
the end
okay.
in my
All right.
head. And then sometimes I'll think the AI, is it one of those times where you pronounce both vowels next to each? Sometimes I said like Nyantha in my head. Like I kept changing it every time. There we go. Okay.
It's a made up word. Whatever, however it works well in your head. It's a completely made up word. But ninth is how it's always been in my head.
Ninth. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone in chat, if you did pick up this book, because Briar in chat, I believe Briar, you're one of the ones that voted for this question mark. I don't remember, but if anyone had other ways they pronounce these words and you feel comfortable sharing, feel free to share, and we can all laugh at ourselves. It's a fun time. uh, so this book was pitched, and when I met Alex at the event where I came across these books, the novel was pitched to me as Mortal Instruments meets Crazy Rich Asians, and that was very, very accurate. And reading it now, I can say that is such a great description in terms of not so much in maybe like plot structure or like the ages of the characters or anything, but more like in the vibes and the themes and like the aesthetics and the just the feeling I got from both those series. Reading this was kind of like smashing those together. And you notice I have many of the Mortal Instruments books on my wall because they were my first teenage like book series obsession. They were my first book crush when I was younger. So I was immediately like sold, done when
I
you picked it up.
loved that series. I loved that series.
Yep. I'm not gonna say hot take. I think lukewarm take because I think lots of people agree. But the Clockwork Angel trilogy is superior to the Mortal Instruments in my opinion. I don't think it's uncommon, but it's also not a popular opinion. But we digress. So now that we know how to pronounce the three fantasy names for the three core, basically like new, I don't know if races are the right word. Some of them, because like the our main character who is the Alistier is still a human, so Alistier is not really a new race per se, but these new roles, I guess. So how did you come up with the names for these things? Because I also am someone who does a lot of tabletop RPGs, as evidenced by the D&D shelf over here. And whenever I'm coming up with things for my miniseries or one shots, I am garbage at naming
No,
anything.
no, you're
I use
not.
name generators all the time. I have the
That's
most like loosely obvious like ways to come up with things. So how do you come up with when you're making up new names for these fantasy elements in your series?
I did exactly what you did, right? So I went through a a word generator, like words that do not exist, right? And honestly, it's just until something kind of pops up
Yeah.
and you're like, "Oh, I can work with that," right? And then you kind of like adjust it so that it kind of fits what your vision is. But
Yeah.
I do exactly what you did. You just generate words. You probably went through hundreds and hundreds of words until I found something that kind of spoke to me. Um,
And did you pick them like you? So you found the ones that spoke to you, and then did you immediately settle on those, or did you then like run them by like loved ones or any other fellow authors and be like, hey, which of these sound good, or was it a very personal thing? You're like, I this one spoke to me, I like it, and it's locked in now.
that's the latter. Yep. I
Gotcha.
didn't actually run it through other people because they might have thought I was crazy. But I did. I just kind of worked with like I found something that worked for me, and then I kind of played with the letters a little bit until I was very happy with it, and
Yeah.
then it got locked in. It
Nice.
is what it is.
And is there any either common or inspiration from like etymology, or if that's right, is that the word for the study of language? I don't remember. I might be mixing up the words. But like is there some sort of language that you also found a common, like pulled any inspiration from? Like I said, the Alistier one immediately felt almost like it had a little bit of French influence to me because of the IER ending, the pronunciation. I know the main characters also speak Mandarin. Is there any influence, or were they purely just like you said, found ways to like generate new words that didn't exist, and it's purely from an English speaking standpoint?
It's mostly from an English speaking
Okay.
standpoint. I wish I could say it was a little bit more sophisticated than that, but I can't.
Hey, if it works, it works,
I
right?
yeah,
So am I correct? So did you self-publish the trilogy?
I did.
I
I did
thought so.
fully. It
Yeah.
was fully self-published.
So then I know we have a lot of people who are in general. It's like we have no idea what that that journey looks like, even the steps to going from I have an idea or even I've written like a first draft to getting
Hmm.
it self-published. And I also know I know someone in my personal life who's also in the Discord who is looking into editing also as a potential career path. So could you share, and it can either be of like just the general slightly vague steps, or you can go as in detail as you want, what your your self-publishing journey looked like once you had this written out and you got this idea
Yeah.
put to paper. What were the steps between that and this that I hold in my hand?
Yes, I can. And I will say I started this journey like in complete ignorance.
Mhm.
Truthfully, like, so the most important thing for an author is you have something written, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of focused, like, you have to, there's nothing to sell or market. So I focused on that a lot. And then once I had something concrete, I was like, oh, maybe I should figure out this whole self-publishing journey. And the good thing is there's so many resources online that help authors kind of figure out, oh, step one, step two, all the way to step whatever you
Yeah.
want it to be. And so there's a lot good, like one of the websites I used was Reedsy, which I think is pretty popular. They're very user friendly. They lay out kind of all the different steps that potential authors should be taking, especially on if you're on a self-publishing journey.
Is that
Um,
like READZY? Is that how
uh,
that URL or?
Reedsy,
Okay, cool.
Reedsy.
For
Yeah,
captions users, if anyone's curious, and make sure captions spell it correctly.
yeah, but it's a great resource, and there's tons of other sites that also do very similar things. And what they do is they lay out what you need to do, but they also amalgamate, I think, a lot of providers,
Hmm.
right? So if they're teaching you about, what do you need to do for editing, there's a lot of editors that work with Reedsy that you could contact through them to get a quote, to see if your styles match and all
Okay.
that things. So it does take quite a bit of time investment
Yeah.
to do it, but I think it's worth it at the end. I thought Reedsy was actually quite well run.
Hmm.
They're very clear, very simple. Sometimes it's almost information overload a
Yeah.
little bit when you're looking at so many different things, because as an author, editing is kind of the first step, I would
Yeah.
say, right? Then you got to think about, unless you're doing the cover yourself, you got to look at someone to build a cover for you, someone to turn it into maybe
Yep.
an ebook, unless you're doing it yourself, to format,
Yep.
to design, do all those things. And then
Hmm.
there's also an aspect of marketing, which is a whole black hole
Yeah.
to
We
me.
actually just got a question in the chat that relates to
Yeah.
that, which was what kind of media strategies did you use to help promote your book? Like were you very social media heavy, in-person events heavy? Like what strategies did you use and what was kind of like your preferred ways to promote your book in that phase?
I think I started with social media, trying to build a social media following. I wouldn't say I'm very good at that. You must
Same.
you must know where your weaknesses are, right? So what I would do with social media is you would contact like influencers, and there's a lot of like book marketing groups, I guess, where
Yeah.
where they kind of amalgamate all the book influencers, and then you can send your book out and they kind of talk about your book.
Mhm.
Do I think that is very effective? I think a little bit mixed.
Okay.
And it depends on what type of book you're marketing. So if you're marketing, I'll call it like a romantasy or dark romance, I find that is a little bit more effective
Yeah.
through that influencer model. Another way that, because I did do a small stint with another marketer where you heavily discount your book to
Okay.
like either like the 99 cent mark, and you post it on a lot of sites that people buy ebooks from,
Yeah, especially because I feel like
right?
with the series, you're banking on the I heavily discount book one, but then if they're hooked, they then buy the book two, book three at like the regular price.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can like discount your second book, etc., just to get the volume
Yeah.
in. Um, but there are so many books out there and
Uh
so
huh.
many great books out there, right? And the thing with books is they're, they're you have to spend time to actually read it, right? And
Yep.
people only have so much time
Mhm.
in their hands. So I did those two.
Did you
And
have
then
many ARC readers for your book? Did you use any sources like NetGalley or anything to get ARC readers to like publish early reviews on platforms like Goodreads or anything?
so I did not.
Okay.
I didn't think, because as a self-published indie author,
Yeah.
I didn't think that my book would be that effective
Mhm.
on something like that. When you're competing with authors who have a huge repertoire of
Yeah.
books or published authors, right? It's actually very difficult, I think, as an indie author, um, to compete.
Mhm.
It's very difficult. I think that there was a third strategy I used. So I did the discounting, I did the influencer, and I did a couple of book like in-person
Yeah.
things. And I would say that the most effective one is actually in person,
Yeah.
because actually get to talk to people, right? And I got to meet you,
Yeah.
Laura, right? Like,
Exhibit
right, but
A. We're here right
and you
now.
get right, and you get like you get to do a 30-second pitch,
Yeah.
right? Versus like when you're on social media and stuff, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
So for me, as an indie author, I thought the in-person was the most effective for me. But I think marketing is probably the hardest thing I
Uh-huh.
had to do, and it's very difficult. And
Mhm.
so if somebody has advice on your stream on how to be more effective, I am happy to take the advice.
I if any advice comes in, I'll let you know. But unlikely. Again, like I said, most of us are just as clueless, and probably now more clueless. And we've gone through it about this process. Why a lot of the questions were about getting published, about marketing it. And even another question just came in the chat. What is the process like to have a book pushed into a big retailer like Indigo, for example?
So that is not as hard, I think. So in order to get into one of the big retail, and I do remember you had a question on becoming an editor.
Yeah.
So I'll circle back to that.
Great.
But getting into Indigo as an indie author is not as difficult or as daunting as it seems, because Indigo has a program specifically geared to indie
Oh,
authors.
that's awesome. I never knew that.
It is actually pretty cool, right? So they will always accept
Mhm.
like indie authors to come in to do book signings.
Yeah.
If you pick some local stores, they will stock a couple of copies of your books. I don't know how long they'll
Yeah.
stock it for, just to see if there's any interest, right?
Yeah.
But they do, I think, rely on indie authors to do the signings, right? To
Yeah.
drive traffic into the store. But they give you the opportunity to do that, which is
Mhm.
amazing.
Oh, for
Uh,
anyone
yeah.
American or maybe like Europeans watching this, Indigo is the Canadian version of like Barnes and Noble,
Yes.
or in the UK, it's a Canadian version of Waterstones or Waterstones. Uh, as someone who also lived there for a while, just in case anyone's like, "What are you talking about? What is Indigo?"
Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. They do try to support local authors in their physical stores.
Yeah, I have seen in my local Indigo. There was one time recently we went and there was an author there that had a table and had both like an old, like I think a YA book and a children's book, and she was there
Mhm.
promoting like both at the same time. Um, Circling back to the editing question, so once you found editors to work with, I only recently learned about, which I don't know if you heard about, I don't know how deep in the trenches of book talk or what corners of like book internet you find yourself in, but it like was one of those stories that then surpassed book talk and became a semi-mainstream story, the whole Age of Scorpius book drama
I
that
did
happened that became just a wild story. And because of that story and watching all these videos talking about that journey, I now know about these various kinds of editors. Before I'm like, there are book editors. Book editors are one type of job, but there's copy editors versus line editors versus developmental
Yep.
editors. I have now learned these things. So how many or what type of editors did you work with when making your trilogy?
So I worked with the copy line
Okay.
editing, but I wouldn't say is as in depth as like in hindsight, as I probably should have, right? And then looking back is always,
Mhm.
easier to say. And I did work with someone to do proofreading before
Yeah.
the book
I
was
will say,
the book's
whoever you did
published.
for proofreading, good job. Because I proofread for my day job. I don't proofread novels. I proofread something called life care plans, which are like medical
Hmm.
reports. It's a very different style of
Wow.
writing, but I do
It-
proofreading things, and so it's one of my biggest pet peeves is when it's like a mainstream book, and I'm finding like grammar errors, typos. I'm finding like obvious things that I'm just like, you're like, you have money. You are a very well like known author. And why is this in your book? Come on, someone do better. So, and it's one of my pet
What is
peeves.
this
And
comma doing here?
to the point, I've even been sometimes petty enough that if like I will like knock down like a rating for a book like half a star if there's enough and I find it egregious, even though I know that's so silly and so petty of me to do, but I'm like, no, it bothers me, and it'll take me out of a scene if there's like this incredible emotional thing happening, but then there's this like super weird formatting or spelling error. It like breaks my immersion, and it bothers me. So I can't remember, and I usually, because I tab some books that I read, like I said, they're really hard to, there we go, I have tabbed this copy, and there are no tabs for errors, because I do sometimes, like, then in my peak petty I will like tab in my annotations anytime there's an error, but there are none in my copy of this, so that's very exciting. It brought me joy.
No, honestly, the editors, I worked with two editors, and they are cited in the book, but they were both fantastic. And so I think I lucked out a little bit there. And I would say if you are looking to go into editing, I actually think it's a well-paying job, actually. Like, I think it's like, especially if you enjoy it. Well, it's if you enjoy it, right?
Yeah,
And
of course.
if you enjoy doing that stuff, I think where, with the explosion of AI and all those things, right? And so I have my own thoughts on that, but where I think the value of the editor is you're almost like a mentor. Right? You're not just checking for grammar. I know in proofreading you really are checking for like spelling.
Proofreading and editing are two kind of different. They're similar skills, but they're not the same.
They're not exactly the same, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with someone who's putting their life, kind of like their joy and their life and their love and their hard labor in front of you, right? And as an editor, I think the value is almost being a bit of a mentor, right? So you're not saying you have to do this, but it's like, hey, have you thought about this, right? Like, as you're kind of going through the process and kind of pulling the author, and so they self-actualize some things as well.
Like, it's almost slightly more collaborative than people might think, as rather than it's like almost like a teacher student, like, here's the notes. It's not like taking something and like with a red pen making all these changes for them and giving it back going, do this, but more pointing out, here's areas that are weaker, let's talk about how to make them stronger, kind of thing.
Yes. And I think that's a huge value. And both the editors I worked with really helped me with that, right? So they did all the I'll call it table stakes. They did table stakes, baseline stuff that they're supposed to do. But their value and where I appreciated them was when they asked me a lot of the hard questions, right? And gave me something to think about. And so I don't know if you plan to read the third book, but if
I do.
In the third book,
definitely do.
Okay, but in the third book, it was way longer than the copy that you have, and I think I cut about 20% out of that book. But they really pushed me to only keep the scenes that were plot relevant. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, if you think about, I love spicy scenes. Well, I really had to, take a knife to certain things and say, well, this actually isn't plot relevant. Right. It doesn't answer a question of who the character is, doesn't add to the plot, stuff like that. And so it was pretty a little bit brutal, a little bit ruthless, but they really pushed me, and I really loved that of both my editors. So
I will say, since you brought up the topic of spicy scenes, I read fairly diversely. Like, fantasy is always my favorite genre, and fantasy is what I would always like go back to. But in the last few years, I've been trying a lot more to branch out and read diversely, as in genre. Like, read some nonfiction, read short stories, read lit fic, read mystery, read horror, like read a bit of everything, but also diversely. Like, make sure, like, look at the authors on my shelf and read more diversely in that way as well. But I also love, after fantasy, the next probably my next most like comfort level and like favorite thing to read is romance. And I find now, so again, with the explosion of like book talk and parts of social media and the way spicy books are marketed, it's like so many people think it's like more spicy scenes in a book the better, or like they love to use tropes, right? And we talk about, here's the tropes in my book to market it, which I understand because they are valuable marketing tools. And one of my favorites is a slow burn romance. So many people will use that because it's popular, and it's like, by slow burn, it's like they think anything that isn't insta love is slow burn, and they call it that, and the characters are still already getting hot and heavy like 25% of the way into the book. I'm like, this is not a slow burn. So the other thing I loved about this is we only, minor spoilers here, so like skip ahead a few minutes if you don't want spoilers about the romance subplot in this book. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put a timestamp to skip ahead to so you can miss this part. But I love the fact that book one, we had romance, it was good romance, but there's no spicy scenes. I had to wait till, and I have it tabbed in book two where it is so I can find it again later. We had to wait till, hold on, let's find out. How far in did we have to wait until?
I think it's probably like more than halfway through.
Yeah, so this tab right here, this dark one at the top in book two, so that's like here, page, my tabs are so small, they're hard to turn to. Page 304 in book two. So we had to wait like 800-ish, 700 something pages, but I'm here for that because that is slow burn. You made me work for it as the reader. And when it happened, it was so much more like, yeah, they're finally doing it. And it was so great. So much appreciated for that in romance. And I find so many, a lot of romance authors now call things slow burn that are not deserving of that trope. And that's not a word that you used either. So it's also not like you, when we were talking at the event where we met, that was never one of the things I remember you saying to me. You might have, and I don't remember it, but that wasn't something that I remember being told when I was pitched this book series. But even if you had, then it would have actually delivered on that premise, which is nice. Shush, watch. I didn't talk to you. Go away. Another question coming in from the chat, and this one I have thoughts as just a reader on this. So interesting your thoughts. As an author, do you read reviews of your book? And if so, do you find it more helpful to read reviews that are like a 3-star rather than a 4 or a 5-star?
So in the spirit of honesty, I do. But I am also very aware that, it's kind of like when I watch a movie, right? I will have my thoughts on whether or not the director did a good job or not, or whether the actor did a good job or not, right? If I felt negatively, I probably wouldn't send Steven, not that Steven Spielberg would like care about my review, right? I wouldn't tell him directly to his face, but I might write something. So I do read it. It does help me. I think there's a certain level, I think, of like, I'll call it skin thickening you need as an author. Because I think some people are very, like, they're critical reviewers, right? And they understand the art of giving a review. But there are also those who don't necessarily give a critical review. And I think they're probably, I'll call it maybe a little bit on the meaner side, right? And you have to be able to look past that as an author, right? And try to pick out what the person is actually trying to say, and see if that's something that you can incorporate into like a future piece. I have taken, because I did get some earlier reviews on the first book, right? And I did incorporate some of the changes that people did comment on that were negatives. And that's helpful. That's actually very, very helpful. When you say things like, oh, this was terrible, I hated it, all that stuff, that's
it's like,
not
that
helpful.
Doesn't tell me why. It's like, well, why did you hate it? Why was it terrible?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think as long as the reviews are like more critical in terms of like telling, hey, what worked, what didn't work. I'm game.
I find a lot of the problem is too with platforms like Goodreads, or in my opinion the preferable like Storygraph or Pagebound. Like there's more and more nowadays, ever more social book platforms. Of course Goodreads kind of has the chokehold on that just because of being the first and around the longest. So many people, like half people use it for like critical reviews, like I'm writing this review for other readers to know whether they want to pick up this book or not. Some people treat them more as like, this is almost like a journal and I'm just journaling my thoughts. Like they're not trying to write a review, they're not trying to write constructive, they're just trying for their own like posterity. They can go back and look at their thoughts. So that's the other thing too, is when I feel like if authors are going to go into review spaces, like you said, you need to have a level of skin thickness, and most of them, like, and make sure that you're keeping in mind most of these are not personal attacks or critiques. Some people take things too far and get personal, and they should not be writing things. But for the most part, they're not attacks on authors as people. They're just people trying to put their opinions out. I have a few book YouTubers and like book influencers that I watch, and I like their content. And one of them in particular is a very, very big proponent of like reviews are for readers and thinks authors should not be in review spaces at all. Part of it for that reason, it's like, well, if you're gonna then be upset by what you read, that this wasn't necessarily written for you to see. That's not why this person wrote it. So but I'm kind of in the middle ground. Like, I think if authors feel like they can handle that and they feel like it's a constructive tool, then go into those spaces and read those reviews. But then you have to be the kind of person who won't hold it, and won't hold it against the readers, because at the end of the day, reading is such a wildly subjective experience. Like, there is no 100%. There is no even, as much as we all think there is, you can't even pick a single book that's ever been written and say this is like the paragon, like this is a perfect book, no notes, because at the end of the day, even with incredible prose, it could be incredibly well researched. It could have the most three-dimensional characters that you get attached to in your life, like anything good you could say about a book, and someone somewhere will disagree and hate it. And because it's such a emotional thing at the end of the day, like, even I was making my top 10 list what I read last year, and I did it just looking at my ratings, but then I was like, read it, I was like, this doesn't feel right. And then I looked at all the books I read, and I made my own top 10 just that, and I was like, only 5 of the books overlapped, and I was like, why is that? And I then had a fun time looking at, why did I rate this one so much lower than this one, and why do I feel like this should be on here? Because at the end of the day, also our feelings change over time. So there's one book I rated like a 3.75, but then that means it didn't make it on my top 10 numerically, because I read lots of things I gave 4 and a few 5s. So then I'm like, but this feels like it deserves to be there. And because over time, as I've sat with the book, my opinions on it have changed. I've also, things happen to you. You're constantly changing as a person. So yeah, it's a very interesting. I'm not.
So did you have to do a reorder?
Did you? I did. I made 2 separate lists. I made a list that was top 10 purely by the numbers, like the ratings I gave in the moment when I had just finished the book and freshly rated it. And then the top 10, what I call based on emotion and vibes, which were me just looking at all the books I read last year and just looking at that, picking like which of these 10 would I pull out and like read again, or which do I just feel like belong on this list.
But that's happened to me many times, where I would read a book the first time and it didn't, like, I probably wouldn't have thought it would be a 4 or 5 star read.
Yeah.
But if I actually go back and read it and I'm like, oh, but you as a person has changed. Your mood has changed. You've grown, all those things. And suddenly that book becomes much stronger the second time I read it. And the reverse has happened.
Yep. There's also books I look at, I gave 5 stars and reread, I'm like, oh, this does not hold up. I don't know what I was thinking when I gave that.
Right. So it happens. And depending on when you read it in your life, and things change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I guess the YouTuber that you love to watch?
There's 2, but yes. Guess.
Is it Rachel?
Reads with Rachel?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one who's the firmly like reviews are for readers and authors do not belong in review spaces. I love her though.
Yeah. Oh, authors should never like be responding or doing anything. But I love Rachel.
Yep.
I love her content. Like, she's so relatable. I just find her very relatable. I love watching her.
I also love that not only it's like bookish content, but also in the current age we are living in, especially for someone like her who lives in the States, the amount of time she also talks about and even shows them the video footage because it's publicly accessible of how she is such a big advocate and goes to meetings at the school board for her kids to fight against books being banned and fight against a lot of these absolutely like bigoted and ignorant people who are doing more harm than good, trying to limit what media kids have access to. And she's actively someone who's trying to uses her platform as well as just her in-person physical time to go and do that.
Well, she walks the walk.
Exactly.
All right, great. She walks. I think I said that wrong. She walks the talk.
No, she walks the walk because she does both. She talks the talk and walks the walk. Most people do one. Okay. They'll do the talk, but not the walk. Like, they're all talk, no action. And she practices what she preaches. The other way to say it.
Well, originally, so every year I don't know how long it's been going on for, but I think in May. So Rachel and a bunch of her book, like I guess the people in that circle of influencers, they always have a meeting. It's like a 2-day event down in Florida, and I had back in 2024, I bought tickets.
Oh, cool.
To attend. before everything kind of blew up.
Yeah.
And then so I had tickets. We were ready to go. I was going to take my kids to Disneyland. I was going to do all that. And then, a lot of the political climate changed. And then we
Yeah.
actually canceled our trip and we didn't end up going. And I was
Yeah.
so sad. I sent her a note.
Yeah, I also, this is the first year. Normally, around this time of year, my husband and I go to Florida to visit some family. And for the first time, we had told him, like, hey, so we really don't feel comfortable going to not only the States, but
Mhm.
especially Florida right now. So I
Yeah.
relate to having to make that decision. It sucked.
Yeah.
Another question coming in from the chat. I enjoying you guys giving us such good questions because again we have a few on my list, but if we don't get to them because we have other ones, that's totally fine. On average, how much time per day roughly were you writing to complete your first book, and did you have a routine that helped you stay focused?
Uh, I think I tried very arbitrarily.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get about 5,000 words down a day,
Yeah.
give or take. Um, I would write. So instead of getting to sit down and watch TV or watch YouTube or all that stuff, I would spend the time writing. And it
Mm-hmm.
was mostly done at night after the kids would be in bed. Because
Yes.
anything like before they're in bed, my time is focused. Like there's the day job, which pays the bills, right? And then family time. And then after they go to bed, that's when I would write. I think it took me, so the three books took me, I want to say about a year and a half in
Okay.
total to like kind of fully get everything to, I'll call it where it was like at 90%.
Yeah.
Um, and it's quite a bit of chunk of time, actually. I know some people can sit down and write like thousands upon thousands of words in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of those people. I actually plan out what I'm writing
Yeah.
and then I write it, right?
Okay.
And I plan and then write, plan and then write. So that's
Did you write in like a Google Doc or a Microsoft software like Microsoft Word, or did you use some kind of third party software like Scrivener or something? Like, what was your preferred writing tool?
I used Scrivener
Okay.
just because I thought it was easier to manage from like writing in chunks.
Yeah.
I found using it like I don't know if something exists today with Microsoft that would allow me to do it in a more manageable way. But because you're writing almost like you're writing by I was writing by
Yeah.
chapter. All right. So Scrivener really allowed me to do it in a very efficient way.
Yeah. I've used
And
Scrivener in
then
the past, so I'm familiar with it.
do you like it? Did you
I like
like
it a lot.
using?
I started using
Okay.
it when I was younger, when I was in my 20s. I did a handful of National Novel Writing Months for a few years in a row.
Oh, really?
NaNoWriMo. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
used Scrivener for that because it
Okay.
was I liked being able to have I like the way it organizes how the it organizes tabs for like here's where I have all my info on like characters, locations, like my basic storyboard, plot things, and without having to like leave the application and go to like another tab or go to like
Yes.
notes here, notes there. It's a place where all your notes, any planning, any inspiration, as well as what you're actually writing could be there. And like you said, make I also did it like chunked my writing because I was just going by what is the minimum words you need to write every day to complete NaNoWriMo, which was like 1,667 words a day, I think, or something like that.
Mhm.
And so I've used it for that, and now I'm using it to plan tabletop RPG campaigns because again, being able to have a
Nice.
thing like magic items, quests, NPCs, locations, world building, lore, and being able to divide your and easily find your
Mhm.
knowledge like that. So yeah, I enjoy it personally.
Yeah, I would do it again. If I were to start writing my next novel, I would probably go back to Scrivener. One is because I already know how it works and
Yeah.
less learning time. But I love it's almost like that sticky note uh, kind of
Yeah. Yeah, it's
methodology,
like an
and that's
organized
very
sticky
helpful.
note thing.
Yeah.
um since as you mentioned, going back to writing, so do you have plans at the moment? Another impromptu question. Do you have plans for any more stories or novels? Are you waiting to give this trilogy some more time or more traction? Or do you have another project already uh in mind to work on?
I have a project in my head, so I kind of dedicated 2025 to reading.
Okay.
It was more like because I was doing a lot of writing before and editing,
Yeah.
I missed out on a lot of books. I didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of time to read. So 2025, I gave myself a break. I said, I'm going to catch up on all the books I wanted to read. So 2026, I think the loose plan is I do have something in my head.
Okay.
It's probably going to end up to be a duology this time.
Nice.
So stay tuned. Stay
Exciting.
tuned. Stay tuned.
What's the best place for people to? I know you have a website, and obviously you have Instagram. What's the best place you recommend if someone's like, I'm only gonna check like one place, or what's the best place to follow you to keep up to date on potential like new books down the line or events you're going to or anything like that?
Instagram is definitely
Okay.
the best place, and it's easy to like if you have questions, if you want to yell at me, you can DM me. But like,
Don't do that. Don't be that
but,
person.
maybe like not all like uppercase yelling. Exclamations are okay. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way to reach out to me.
Yeah. Going back to so you had so many great questions in the chat. Go back to the list of questions I had beforehand for a second. Because one thing I particularly also very much enjoyed reading this book. So I wrote there's a lot of great representation in this book because we have bisexual characters, we have neurodivergent characters, we have lots of like racial diversity in the book. So there's just lots of great representation across the board overall. So are any of the characters in this book based on people from your real life? Obviously you don't need to name names like this one's like my child, this one's my husband, whatever. But just and you can use the character names in the book, but were any characters like heavily influenced by people in your real life, and which ones? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say most characters are not influenced by someone in my real life. But
Okay.
the one character who I lose a lot of sleep, I lost a lot of sleep over, and sometimes I still lose a little bit of sleep over, is Maddie. So Maddie is based on someone who's very near and dear to me, whom I love very, very much. So there are characteristics within Maddie's personality that
Mhm.
are very close to this person who's very near and dear to me. But I also understand that, like, my experience with people on the autism spectrum is limited to a handful,
Yeah.
right? So that I think is what kind of kept me up. I never want to do harm,
Yeah.
right? So it's you don't want to lean into like stereotypes or things like that. So I actually reached out to a speech language pathologist I know
Mhm.
who solely works with children who are in the autism spectrum. And so she really helped me, like she read through like all the pieces
Yeah.
where Maddie plays a big role, and she like helped me refine so that like it's not doing any harm. And that's the last thing. And I think it still keeps me up a little bit
Yeah.
at night today, because the last thing I want to do is do harm,
Yeah.
especially like they face like,
Mhm.
anyways, I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I will say I kind of, if I was going to pick one character, I would have guessed that just because the way Maddie, who is the brother to our main character, if anyone's curious, was written, it felt like just a lot of attention to detail been paid. Because first of all, I'm pretty sure that you never actually say the word, like no one ever describes him as or calls him autistic in the book, but it's just clear in the parts of his personality that people talk about and the way he interacts with the world and the way he puts forth his boundaries and explains to people things he needs to help him feel more comfortable. It's clear he's neurodivergent in some way, but I think if it's said in the book, it's maybe said like once. But I thought that was such a good choice because that made it feel a lot more like, hey, we're just talking about someone, because it's neurodivergency in general is such a spectrum. There is no one size fits all for that. So even just labels for that, any label outside neurodivergent almost feels like they mean less and less every day as we learn more about being neurodivergent and stuff. And then it's funny you mentioned you reached out to a speech language pathologist because I was looking for one of my annotations in the book because so
That
you
was a
asked,
shout out.
yeah, because one of the, it's during conversation, the protagonist is asking one of the like fantasy demon hunter kind of race, so what would you have done if you weren't, protecting the human race from these creatures? Like, what if this life hadn't been chosen for you, what kind of career do you think you would have chosen for yourself? And the person responds, I don't know, maybe a chef or a linguistics teacher, or maybe even a speech language pathologist. And then I wrote, shout out SLPs, because again, my day job, life care plans, I read a lot of reports from speech language pathologists, and I'm fascinated by the work they do. And that's one of those careers, circling very back to the beginning. While we were setting up, I mentioned being a stage manager, and Alex expressed interest in hearing about that. And we both mentioned it's one of those careers that people don't tell you exists until you're kind of like already an adult. I wish if someone had told younger me what speech language pathology was, I see a very, very high chance that that's what I'd be doing right now. Like, that's a career I
I
absolutely probably would have loved to get into. And of course, my mom left. My mom's like, I did tell you it exists because my mom's a life care planner and works with speech language pathologists. But like, but you didn't do a good job. You didn't explain it well
You
enough.
didn't sell it
You
properly.
didn't sell it, mom. Yep. Also, while I was looking for that annotation, found another one where the sanctuary, like the area where all the Nainths live in this book series, and they all can fly. They're all like, incredibly abled people. They're like supernaturally strong winged monster hunters, right? Like all of these people have no accessibility needs, like in terms of physical accessibility. But there's a paragraph when Emmeline is being brought to Sanctuary for the first time, and they mentioned there's an elevator and accessibility ramp on the other side of the complex, so they don't get used often. So we also love nods to accessibility in fantasy, is even though there's technically no need for that to exist in this place, because they are all highly abled magical beings, but it just shows that, hey, we should maybe be thinking about anyone who might enter a space at any time, whether the primary users of that space need it or not, because that's one of the things our world could do a lot better about is accessibility. And so many spaces, it's one of those, until I became close friends with someone who was in a wheelchair, you do not even realize how limited our
How hard
day-to-day
it is
world
for them.
is until you have to like help them figure out their plans to go anywhere, or like you start playing, you're like, oh my god, I just realized, because even like a tiny little step up curb to get into a building, so it means like even if that whole building, it's like, oh, there's no stairs inside, it's like flat, we have like wide bathrooms or whatever, but there's one little curb, even getting up in there, technically not accessible, can't get in there. Like,
Yep.
so we love nods to accessibility in fantasy, because fantasy is a race too, where so often that stuff doesn't come up because you have a lot of these supernaturally
Everyone's
empowered
powerful.
people, right? So you don't see mention even at all of accessibility needs in a fantasy series, which I appreciated. Another question from the chat: do you have any advice for anyone thinking about becoming an author?
Thick skin. Well, it's just like making sure that you are able to like know that I don't think anyone's ever actually meant to like hurt your feelings, right? When they're giving you advice, is really looking for what is it that I can improve on. I think that's a big one. That was a big learning curve for me, because it's like being at work and you build a presentation, right? And then you give it to your boss, and then your boss is like, this is terrible. You're really only getting feedback from one person, and you know that person, right? But like when you're an author or you're an artist, like a painter, or you're doing a play on a stage or
Yeah.
anything like that, right? You're kind of opening yourself up to the public, and anyone can do your performance review.
Yeah, because
It's like
if you are
it's like
creating art for consumption, whether that be
yes,
written, visual, physical, on a screen, like you are inherently making something for people to have an opinion on, and you will never be able to control that opinion or have a say with that opinion. You can, obviously, there's an opinion you hope people take away. There's even like a movie director, an actor on stage, an author. There is a takeaway you hope your audience has, but you will never control that, and you will never have 100% takeaway that you want, even
yeah.
if a good chunk of your audience has the experience you want them to have. It'll never be 100%.
Yeah, and you can't control that narrative, right? Like, and you shouldn't want to, right? Like you're putting art out. Um, so be ready for, I'll call it a public performance review. That would be but I would say know the process,
Yeah.
right? In terms of like what you're signing up for, in terms of self-publishing, because self-publishing can get very expensive very quickly. So you have to really understand your own budget, and know where you can leverage friends, word of mouth, to see if you can make, because it's not an exceptionally, I'll call it, well-paying job being an author. It's very, I actually think it's very difficult to make a living out of it. And so you have to kind of go in with your eyes wide open. There are a percentage of people who will become very popular. They're able to sell a ton of books, and that's amazing. Super happy for them. I think for the majority of independent authors, you will. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard if it's your sole source of income.
Yeah,
I
because
think.
as you mentioned during our Q&A, you have a day job to be like, this is not your sole source of income.
Oh no, no, no. It would not pay any bills
Yeah.
whatsoever. But the flip side is, because it's not my income source, I was able to write something that I loved.
It took some of the
even
pressure
though
off. It made it more of a passion, like a creative passion project than a.
exactly. And I didn't have to write about like a very popular trope right now. I didn't have to write that popular trope because I just didn't want to,
Yeah.
right? It to make my book popular, right? So it was more a passion project, a love. Um, but yeah, make sure you have a budget. I
Yeah.
would say as an author, because editing is very expensive, and
Hmm.
you're not doing one round of editing um, at
At
all.
least you shouldn't be. Anyone who
You're
knows what
at
they're doing.
minimum doing 2 rounds of editing. So like
Otherwise,
definitely
you have
have
an
a good
Age of
budget.
Scorpius situation. So words to the wise.
Yeah,
Not to throw shade on that book or that author. That situation is just a very unique outlier in the world of publishing. It's a wild
yeah,
story.
yeah.
Whole rabbit hole you
Editing
could
is
fall
worth it
down.
though. Never skimp. So my advice also, don't skimp on the editing, right? It is 100% worth it to have someone who is a professional
Yeah.
look at it. It's worth it. So
Mm-hmm. The editors that you worked with, what kind of experience did they have? Like, did they go to school for that? Had they been doing it for years? Like, when you chose to work with them, what was it about them
mhm.
specifically that made you decide that was a good fit?
The first one, I think I kind of went in a little bit blind. So again, I feel like I got lucky. So I just reached out to an editor that I had seen that my sister actually recommended to me because she's read a couple of books that editor had edited, and it just worked out. We clicked. Like we had a Zoom meeting, we clicked, and I was like, oh, I liked her style, and so that worked out really well for me. I'm actually not sure if she went to school for it, but she was great.
Yeah.
The second one was word of mouth because I wanted someone just to do a light proofreading
Mm-hmm.
for me. It was a word of mouth recommendation, and I loved her. Like she didn't just do proofreading for me.
Yeah.
Like she was next level. And I think she has a master's in like English literature, like, and
Always helpful.
like, and I could tell as soon as she started like going through some of my work, I was like, oh, you're good. She was fantastic.
Yep.
And she fact checked a lot of my stuff for me just because she likes to fact check people, which was a bonus for me. So yeah.
Nice. Um, Speaking of kind of adjacent to fact
Mhm.
checking. So this book is set in Toronto, which is a city I know somewhat well, having spent a fair amount of time there. And the sanctuary where the Nainth live and like they keep their existence pretty much hidden from humanity, but they have what sounds like an entire almost like city block of buildings that is theirs, and they through part magic, part just paying the right people and knowing the right people, like they have a way to keep their presence in the city on the down low, and they have all this space, but no one questions like what these buildings are, who's there, what they're for, etc. So my question was, did you have a place in is there a neighborhood or a place in Toronto that you envisioned where the sanctuary is, like in your head, replace whatever buildings are actually there and drop it in, and or not specifically?
Not specifically. I know I wanted it to be in downtown Toronto. I love downtown Toronto. I love the University of Toronto campus.
Yeah.
I think it's so beautiful. Does it fit exactly? Probably not. but but it's a made up world. It's fine.
Okay, because I kept
Yeah.
trying to like place it in my head just because I've that
Where
this is
did
what
you
my brain is.
picture it?
Well, because aesthetically, I was picturing like Hart House, U of T from like the aesthetics, but I'm like, but it can't be there because that is like
I know.
a world
That's
university. Like
wrong.
that we can't have fantasy people hiding and using like U of T can't be some giant lie that is covering up for these people. So it's not actually there. So, but aesthetically, I couldn't help just but get
It was the
that out of
vibes.
my
It was
head.
the
Yeah.
vibes of the University of Toronto,
Yeah.
I would call it. But yeah, I
But
agree.
somewhere
It probably
generically in
can't.
the city.
Yeah, kind of just generically.
Yeah, no, my husband and I had our engagement photos done at Hart House, U of T. So special place in my heart for that part of the city. Uh, and I think there's one more because we kind of answered the last question earlier by accident. So the last question on my our pre-assembled list. So where did your inspiration come from for the appearance, like the physical appearance of the razor and the Nainth? Because I don't know if I misinterpreted, because a lot of times I don't get my brain, I read so fast. It's almost like my brain will skip over things and I have to consciously make myself go back and reread things because I'm just so like voraciously trying to figure out what happens next, a lot of like descriptions sometimes I will like read and skip over unintentionally. So then I was trying to reconjure like what they look like, because the names have a human form where they look like, you know, everyday humans, and then they transform into their supernatural form, which was winged gray skin was mentioned, I believe. But like for the most part, I clearly their appearance did not matter to me as a reader. I was like, I get the vibes because I can't really picture. And then the razor, the teeth, claws, they also have wings. The wings sounded similar to the style because they're like the leathery, like bat dragon like wings, not like feathery angelic wings for both of the races. So in my head, they looked somewhat similar, just it was like largely skin type that was different, because the razor have like this kind of translucent-y grayish skin, if I'm remembering correctly. At any point if I'm wrong, whereas I pictured the Nainth as almost more like gargoyles from like the animated kids show Gargoyles. The razor is more like weird like gargoyle dragon hybrids. So I wonder what was when coming up with what these two races look like, was there a reason for making them very similar, or did I as a reader just misinternalize this and they don't actually look as similar as they look in my brain?
No, I actually think you got it like pretty spot on. So the inspiration for the Nainth was, I'll call it, very close to a gargoyle.
Yeah, because that's what I pictured. I basically just pictured
like
sexy gargoyles
of Notre
in my
Dame.
head.
Like if you want to do that, that was, and it was meant to be more of a darker gray, leathery type of like character, whereas the Razor, they were more translucent but less gray, and I picture them more closer to like an alien, but with like wings and claws. And it was an intentional decision, because often if you see in media, we use color to depict good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Dark is always bad, light is always good. And
which
so
of
I was
course
like,
has internalized systemic racist roots.
and so I decided to like, it was a conscious decision to actually flip it, and I made
Both
what perceived, well the Nainth were dark and like scary, and the Razor still scary, but they were light, right? So that's why I kind of leaned on the translucent, kind of like colorless, right? And so that was a decision. But then as you kind of move through the books, you'll notice like we think these are all good and these are all bad. But as you kind of read through the story, they'll kind of like, you'll say, oh, it's not as clear cut as what you would normally typically think as good and bad, right? So that was a decision. I'm not sure it came through that well in the storyline.
But in the second book, that starts to come through. But the second book, we get to spend a lot more time with the Razor, and like we see part of their actual world. We get to go there a lot more of them, have conversations with the characters. So that definitely comes through in book 2. Book 1, I don't know. Again, the other problem with me having read both books before this is I start to conflate them together a little bit in my head. I need to like try and make sure I'm actively distinguishing what like some of the stuff that's obvious, what is book 1, what is book 2, but some of the other things, the nuance of it all. So yeah, that we are already, it has been an hour already, which is wild. Time flies. So there is one more question in the chat, and this will be our last question that we get to for today. So do you have any interest in taking your authorship and writing in the direction of shorter stories or short form content, or sticking with longer novels in the same vein as these?
That is a good question. I'm not sure. I've never written a short story. I think it would actually be a very interesting creative exercise.
Short is so much harder than long. Like having to distill like complex ideas into a concise but still like elegant way. Because like I've read a handful. I have a one shelf on here that is short stories specifically, that I until this year I did like a really crazy project where I made a master spreadsheet of my entire library a few weeks ago just because I got bored. And I didn't think I had that many short stories because it's not something I read a lot, but I actually have like 7 or 8 short story anthologies in my library, which is a lot for me. And I find I am so much more critical of short stories, but it's because they have so much less time to do like what a full length book like this. I have so much more time to get to know characters, to have ideas fleshed out. Like I feel like if you are a short story author, you already have a much harder job ahead of you. So I would be very intimidated if I ever went into writing to write short stories.
So I agree with you. I think it's much more intimidating to try to write a short story, because yeah, you have to be a lot more concise, right? And your ideas have to be like really, really tight,
Mhm.
for you to get your story through. But I do think it would be a good creative exercise to try to do that. It might never see the light of day.
But just a thing for you do for you
Yeah,
at home, and then also
yeah.
then it could be you write it and then you do turn that into something longer.
Hmm.
But the challenge of how short can I get this the
And
first
then it
time?
becomes a trilogy, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, ah.
It's like, well, there goes that plan, the best laid plans and all that. Yeah, because also I find short stories, it's so much harder to, like, you have to be so talented at the same level of like emotional impact with a long story, because you just have so much more time to develop a relationship
Hmm.
with your reader and do that. Like, I can only think of one short story that ever like lived up to, and like I would go back and reread the way I would go back and reread some of my favorite long form books, and think, and then I was that much more impressed that it's like you took me on this journey in such a brief time. Oh my god, I feel like I just read like feel like I just read freaking like Wheel of Time or something after reading this short story, which is impressive. But yeah, only one for all the short stories that I
Hmm.
own and have read, only one was really like super super memorable in that way. So it's definitely any author who does
Hmm.
short stories, more power to you and all the respect in the world, because it is
Hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for offering to do this and being the first author to join us on our Twitch book club in our little corner of the internet. This will go up on YouTube, so if you came by for part of the live stream, missed the beginning, or you watched the beginning, you want to come back, watch the end, the VOD's always there, or you can look it up on my YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, thank you so much for hanging out with us and coming to watch this. I will put links for Alex's Instagram and website in the video description on YouTube, so you can go ahead and follow her there, see, keep up to date with any events she's going to, projects she's working on. And if you have anything you want to close out with, if you want to promote anything, any specific events or books, or just any last things you want to tell anyone who might be considering picking up Of Light and Nightmares, go for it before we wrap up for today.
I would say that, please give it a shot. It's honestly, I'm only speaking on behalf of indie authors. Like, we always hope that people give our books a chance, because we know as a reader you have so much choice available to you, right? And you never know what's going to click. So give it a shot. If you ever want to reach out to me, feel free to do so through my Instagram. Um, and happy reading. And I wish you everybody a really, really great 2026.
Yes. One more thing I'll add, if I can pitch this book to anyone. One of the other reasons why I was drawn to it, other than the pitch of two series that I already loved, so much fantasy and romantasy I find that I read lately. It's like our main characters are they always skew young, because everyone's like, that's when you have the most like energy and you're generally like young and hot and all these things. We have characters like the main character is in her 30s, is like a grown-ass adult, has an established life, has all this like personal history and connections, and it is so nice to read fantasy. So see, as like I get older and read fantasy where like adults, like minimum like 30s and above, are the main characters, because also it's so much more interesting, because when you're if you're a 20 something, you've lived so much less life, you're less established. It's very easy if you get some like fated destiny and you become so important to the fate of the universe, yeah, you have less connections to throw away, you can just jump right into this new world that you've now been exposed to. But when you're like a grown adult who has a whole life you've established, it's a lot harder to be like, so the world wants me to do what now, and you're asking me to just throw my life away or jump into this whole thing.
You're,
That's
I
a
have
lot.
a job.
Yeah, I have a
Like,
job. I
a
have
job to
family.
get to.
I have a public persona. Like, what do you mean? So I also loved that element of this book, and that's something I look for more and more in fantasy now, is protagonists that skew older, because they tend, all the ones that get popular, all the ones you hear about, tend to be all our like 19 to 23-year old like heroes and heroines, and I'm like, no, where are the 30 somethings? Where are the 40 somethings? Come on, give me the
Where are
adults.
my middle-aged people?
Thank you. So if that sounds appealing to you, then you should give this series a shot. If even the whole trilogy, at least the first book. But I do think you're gonna want this one pretty close by, given where this one ends. Just my personal opinion. You've been warned. All right, thanks everybody for being here. Our first live stream of 2026, And we'll see you on the next one. If you want to join my book club Discord, the link is in the chat. That invite never expires. It's always open. We are currently reading, we went the opposite. So we went from indie author to super well-known book, but it's been on my TBR and I've just never read it for ages, and it got voted for. We're currently reading Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo for January. Is our
Which
next
is a
read.
great book.
I'm not very far in, but I'm
up.
enjoying it so far. So if you either want to join in for future reads, vote on future books, just have more people to talk all things bookish with, or if you also want to read Six of Crows with us, the month is young. We've just started. Hop on in there. Link is in the chat. If you're watching YouTube, links down below in the description. And hope to see you there. We have fun. It's a good time. And it's the most like casual, low effort book club you'll join. There aren't like super harsh deadlines. Like you don't have to read. You don't have to be a speed reader. You don't have to like read every single book we picked that year. You could maybe pick 2 or 3 months. The rest of the months, if they don't vibe with you, it's not like, oh, you're kicked out of book club now. You only have to read what brings you joy. And that's how it is. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your weekend. Bye.
Thank you for having me.